So we need to be able to graph secant and cosecant functions with transformations. So I see a cosecant function. So first of all, I'm going to figure out what the reciprocal function for cosecant with the same transformations looks like. We know the reciprocal of cosecant is sine, so I'm going to figure out the graph of 2 sine the quantity x plus pi fourths, and then I'll use that as a sketching aid to graph the cosecant. So first of all, I'm going to look for the period, and we know the period of sine is 2 pi, and since there's not a coefficient on the x, the period will be 2 pi. We know the 2 is the amplitude, and then we've got a phase shift. We have x plus pi over 4 in the parentheses. We're putting it equal to 0, solving it and seeing that we need to shift things to the left by pi fourths. All right, so I'm going to draw the axes. 1, 2, 3. The fourth one is 2 pi. And then I'm going to do another period here, and that's 4 pi. So half of that's pi, and half of that is pi over 2. All right, if I go to the left of the y-axis over, this is going to be at negative 2 pi. And then we're going to go as high as 2 above and 2 below because the amplitude is 2. There's no vertical shift, so we'll be oscillating about the x-axis. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw this sine graph, and then I will figure out from there how to get the cosecant graph. Alright, so first of all I'm going to graph 2 sine x, and then I'm going to do the shift. So at 0, sine is 0. I'm going to make an x, and then it goes to its maximum, and then it crosses, and then it goes to its minimum, intercept, max, intercept, min, intercept. Back the other direction, min, intercept, max, intercept. Now we're going to apply the phase shift to the left by pi fourths. Well, the tick marks are pi halves, so I need to move half a tick mark to the left. Move each one half a tick mark to the left. And as I get each of those moved half a tick mark to the left, then I'm going to connect them up in a sine graph. Okay, so there is the sine graph. Now to graph the reciprocal function, everywhere that the sign is 0, when I flip it over, it will make it undefined. So everywhere that it crosses the x-axis, oh, that went crooked. Everywhere I cross the x-axis, I need to make a vertical asymptote. And after I get those asymptotes in, I'm ready to graph the cosecant. Where the maximum of the sine was, that's the minimum for this piece of the cosecant. Where the minimum is, that's the maximum for that piece. And just go ahead and put those in there. Okay. Now let's go ahead and figure out where the asymptotes are. And so normally the sign would have been 0 at 0, but it was moved to the left by pi fourths. So there's an asymptote at x equal minus pi fourths. We could use that one, or we could find the next one that's positive. Usually they like you to list a positive one. And so that one would be over here 1, 2, 3 pi fourths. So x equal 3 pi fourths, and then those asymptotes are every pi apart, so I could just put plus pi k. Now let's go ahead and look at another one. And this one we have a secant, so the first thing I want to do is graph the reciprocal function of y equal cosine of 2x minus 2 pi thirds. So first of all, the period is going to be 2 pi divided by what's sitting in front of the x, which is 2. So the period is pi. So as I'm drawing this, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. This fourth one's going to be pi. And then to do another period, that's going to be 2 pi. and back the other direction, that's going to be negative pi. Looks like we go as high and as low as 1 because there's no number in front, and there's no vertical shift, but there is a phase shift. So we take the 2x minus 2 pi thirds, put it equal to 0, and solve it for x. And when we do that, if I divide this by 2 and this by 2, the 2's cancel. So the phase shift is pi thirds, and it's positive. It's moved to the right. So let's figure out our tick marks. This is pi halves, and this is pi fourths. Whoops, I wrote a third because I was thinking of the phase shift, but that half of pi halves is pi fourths. So when we figure out the phase shift, that's going to be a little trickier because it's not in our tick mark. And so pi thirds would be taking pi here and dividing it in 3 pieces. And so we've got those pieces right here, and that's how it's going to be shifted to the right by that amount. And so let's go ahead and put some x's on, and then we'll do the shifting. Normally at 0 the cosine is at its max, and then it's going to cross, and then min, and then cross, max, cross, min, cross, max, and then back the other direction. Okay, so let's take and shift all of those points over by this far. So this one's going to go here, and the next one is going to be shifted by that amount, and each one is going to be shifted over by pi thirds. And so let's go ahead and get these others. And so here is our cosine graph with the shift. And now let's go ahead and make vertical asymptotes everywhere that we had the cosine equaling 0. And then we're ready to get our graph. And we'll just put the pieces in here. Now we have everything we need except the asymptotes, so let's figure those out. The asymptote, when you figure out for cosine, the first asymptote normally would have been right where our first x was, right here on the axis, and that was at pi over 4. But we've got to add pi over 3 to it because everything gets shifted by pi thirds. So that'll give us our first asymptote, and then we can just add pi halves to each of those because we know our period was pi, and the asymptotes come twice in the period, halfway through and then. So let's go ahead and figure out what that would need to be. This will make into twelfths by timesing that one by 3 and that one by 4. So it looks like it is at 7 pi twelfths. So the asymptote that was at pi fourths got moved over to 7 pi twelfths. So 7 twelfths would be an asymptote, but it's not the first positive asymptote, because if we would have had a point over here at negative pi fourths, by the time we shifted it to the right by pi thirds, it would be the first positive one. So that would be if we had negative pi fourths and we shifted that one to the right by pi thirds. We know that negative pi fourths is negative 3 pi twelfths plus pi thirds is 4 pi twelfths, and so that would end up being pi twelfths. So the first positive asymptote would be at x equal pi twelfths, and then they are every pi over 2k, because the period is pi, so you're going to go half a pi to get to the next asymptote, and then another half a pi to the next one, and so forth.